Okay, Reddit, I'm still shaking. I seriously need to vent before I lose my mind. I'm Darla Maxey, and I live in a, well, let's just call it a developing neighborhood. Translation: gentrification is hitting hard, and the new residents aren't exactly thrilled with the existing ones. I'm a black woman, and I've lived in my house for almost 10 years now, long before the overpriced coffee shops and yoga studios started popping up. My neighbor, Karen Gomez, is one of the new residents. Picture the stereotype: blonde, constantly in yoga pants, and always has that pinched, disapproving look on her face. We've never really interacted much, beyond the occasional strained hello when passing each other on the sidewalk. But today was something else entirely. It was a Saturday morning, and I was just doing my usual weekend chore, taking out the trash. Nothing out of the ordinary. I rolled my bin to the curb, and as I was heading back to my house, Karen came storming out of her house, looking like a human thundercloud. "You can't be doing that now," she shrieked, her voice way too loud for 9 a.m. I stopped dead in my tracks, completely bewildered. "What are you talking about, Karen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," she said, pointing a manicured finger at my trash bin. "You people are always doing things at the wrong time. It's unsightly. You shouldn't even have the right to live here if you're going to do that." "Excuse me?" I said, my blood starting to boil. "I'm taking out my trash. Like everyone else on the street." "No, you don't understand," she continued, her face contorted with anger. "This is our neighborhood now. We have standards. And frankly, you're bringing it down." She started ranting about property values and how certain people didn't care about keeping things tidy. I tried to interject, to tell her she was being ridiculous and racist, but she wouldn't let me get a word in. Then, she did the unthinkable. She spat on me. Right on my arm. I was so shocked, I just stood there, frozen. The spit dribbled down my skin, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Maybe that will teach you some manners," she sneered, before turning on her heel and flouncing back into her house. I just stood there, staring at the spot on my arm, tears welling up in my eyes. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I ran inside, scrubbed my arm raw, and then just cried. I felt violated, humiliated, and furious. I called the police, reported the assault, and they said they'd send someone over to take a statement. I'm still processing everything. I am thinking of getting a lawyer. I don't want to let what happened go unknown. What do you all think? AITA for wanting her arrested? The police came and took my statement, and they seemed genuinely concerned. They said they'd have to investigate, talk to Karen, and see if there were any witnesses. But honestly, I didn't have much hope. It was my word against hers, and I knew how these things often went. I decided to do something more. I felt empowered, and I knew I had to do something. I installed a security camera facing the street from my front porch. I wasn't going to let this woman harass me again without proof. I also started talking to my other neighbors, the ones who had been living in the neighborhood for a while. I told them what happened, and I was surprised by how many of them had similar stories about Karen. It turns out, she'd been making their lives miserable for months, with her constant complaints and snide remarks. One of my neighbors, Mrs. Rodriguez, even had a video of Karen harassing her about her garden, claiming it was too colorful and didn't fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood. We decided to band together and share our experiences online, creating a Facebook group called Living with Karen Gomez. Within days, the group had hundreds of members, all sharing their own stories of Karen's racist and entitled behavior. Someone even dug up Karen's LinkedIn profile. She was a marketing executive at a pretty big firm. I debated whether or not to contact her employer, but then a miracle happened. A neighbor across the street had a security camera that captured the entire spitting incident. Clear as day. They sent me the footage, and I uploaded it to the Facebook group. It went viral almost immediately. News outlets picked up the story, and suddenly, Karen Gomez was the most hated woman on the internet. My phone started ringing non-stop. Reporters wanted to talk to me, activists wanted to organize protests, and lawyers were offering their services pro bono. It was overwhelming, but also incredibly validating. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. This woman was a menace, and now the whole world knew it. Karen's employer was probably the first to act out of all of this. They released a statement condemning her behavior and announced that she had been terminated, effective immediately. The police contacted me again, saying they were now pursuing charges against Karen for assault and battery. It felt like justice was finally being served. And it all started with a trash can. The viral video and the subsequent media attention put a spotlight on Karen's life in a way she never expected. It wasn't just about the spitting incident anymore. People were digging into her past, looking for any dirt they could find. And they found plenty. Someone discovered that Karen had a history of making racist comments online, using anonymous accounts to spread hateful rhetoric. There were screenshots of her posts, filled with vile language and discriminatory views. It became clear that her behavior wasn't just a one-time lapse in judgment, it was a pattern of prejudice. But the biggest revelation came when someone started looking into her finances. It turned out that Karen's successful career was built on a foundation of lies and fraud. She had been embezzling money from her company for years, using it to fund her lavish lifestyle and her obsession with improving the neighborhood. The details were shocking. She had set up a shell corporation to funnel money out of the company's marketing budget, using fake invoices and inflated expenses. She had even been using company funds to pay for her personal expenses, like her designer clothes and her luxury car. When the police got wind of this, they launched a full-scale investigation. They raided her house, seized her financial records, and interviewed her colleagues. The evidence was overwhelming. Karen was facing serious charges of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. It was unbelievable. This woman, who had acted so superior and entitled, was actually a criminal. All this time, she was judging me and my neighbors, while secretly stealing from her employer. The hypocrisy was staggering. Not only would she be unemployed, but she would be facing jail time. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. On the one hand, she deserved everything that was happening to her. She had hurt so many people with her racism and her arrogance. On the other hand, it was sad to see someone's life crumble so spectacularly. I realized she was going to be ruined forever. However, it was all of her own doing. The news of Karen's financial crimes spread like wildfire. Her name was mud. Her former friends and acquaintances distanced themselves from her, pretending they had never known her. She became a pariah, shunned by everyone she thought was her peer. The media had a field day, dissecting every aspect of her life. They interviewed her former colleagues, her estranged family members, and even her ex-boyfriend. The picture that emerged was of a deeply unhappy and insecure woman, who used her wealth and her position to try to fill the void inside her. The legal proceedings were swift and brutal. Karen's lawyers tried to argue that she was suffering from a mental breakdown, but the evidence was too strong. She was found guilty on multiple counts and sentenced to several years in prison. She was also ordered to pay back the money she had stolen, which meant she would likely lose everything she owned. Her house was foreclosed on, her car was repossessed, and her bank accounts were seized. She went from living in luxury to being completely destitute. It was a harsh lesson, but one she desperately needed to learn. I have no idea where she is living or if she has anywhere to go. I tried to feel bad, but I could not. She did this to herself. I heard from an old neighbor that she was seen moving out quickly, but I did not see it. I was at work, but it did not surprise me. When I got home, I was sure to drive by her house and it was empty. I actually felt relieved. I also decided to increase my security camera coverage just because I was worried that something like this might happen again. The world is full of Karens. The crazy thing about it is that they always seem to get caught. I got an update from Mrs. Rodriguez the other day. She told me she saw a Karen sitting on a bench in the park a few blocks away, completely disheveled and alone. Apparently, she was wearing the same yoga pants she always wore, but they were now ripped and dirty. She looked like she hadn't showered in days. My neighbor tried to approach her, to offer her some help, but Karen just glared at her and told her to go away. She was still clinging to her sense of superiority, even in her current state of destitution. Mrs. Rodriguez said she looked like a completely broken woman. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. It was hard to imagine someone falling so far, so fast. But then I remembered the spitting incident, the racist remarks, and the years of harassment. I remembered how she had made my life and the lives of my neighbors miserable. And the sympathy quickly faded away. Karen has been kicked out of her life and now has lost everything. I heard that she now is homeless. I do not feel bad at all because she put herself in this position. She was a racist woman who felt like she was above everyone else. This is exactly what she gets, and deserves. I am a strong believer in karma. It's a reminder that actions have consequences, and that treating people with disrespect and contempt can come back to haunt you. Karen's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of entitlement, prejudice, and greed. I am so happy I did not give up. I stood up for myself and my neighbors. It could have been easier to just let her get away with it, but I couldn't. I am also proud to be an inspiration for all of the black women who have been discriminated against. Hopefully my story gives them the courage to stand up for themselves. They do not have to allow anyone to treat them poorly.